The colony called Haven 9 had always been a quiet and peaceful place. People there believed they lived far enough from trouble, far enough from danger, far enough from the old conflicts of the galaxy. It was a place where families grew food on green terraces, and children played under tall silver-leaf trees. Ships came and went smoothly every day, carrying supplies and sending out trade goods. No one imagined that the calm life they knew was about to break. Apart in a single terrible weak dot, it started with strange signals picked up by the outer scanners. At first, the officers in the small command center thought it was just interference. Solar storms often caused those problems. But then more alerts started flashing, stronger ones, clearer ones, until even the junior technicians felt the weight of something wrong. They zoomed in on the strange readings again and again, hoping it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Unidentified warships were entering the star system. The officers called for the colony council at once. Soon the whole underground meeting room filled with worried faces. Everyone there had seen problems before, but nothing like this. The readings showed dozens of ships, then hundreds, moving in a slow circle around the far side of the system, almost like they were studying Haven 9, waiting for something no one knew what they wanted. No one even knew who they were, until one of the older officers whispered a word no one wanted to hear. VORATH. Many in the room had only heard that name in dark stories. A species known for their destructive force. They didn't fight because they needed land or resources. They fought because they believed any weaker world did not deserve to exist. They never communicated, never negotiated, never left survivors when they came in full strength. They were a moving, storm-cold, silent, unstoppable dot, and now they were here. In the first few hours, Haven 9 tried to send out messages to nearby human colonies. They reached no one. Something in space was blocking the signals. When they tried to launch emergency ships, they didn't make it far. The Vorath destroyed them without even moving out of position. The colony council fell into a panic. They gathered inside the deepest bunker, protected by thick walls, but all of them knew the truth. This bunker would do nothing once the Vorath landed. High above, the colony's main defense system fired shot after shot at the approaching ships, but each shot faded or scattered long before reaching its target. It felt as if the enemy ships swallowed the attacks like dust. In just 2 days, the Vorath finally revealed themselves. A huge, dark vessel almost the size of a city moved closer to Haven 9. It glowed with harsh red lights and released smaller ships that spread out in the sky like a cloud of insects. People on the ground looked up from windows and streets, frozen in fear. The sky that once looked calm now looked like a closing trap. Inside the command bunker, no one tried to hide their fear anymore. The officers watched the screens, showing more enemy ships entering orbit. Each hour, the situation became worse. The Vorath fired at defensive satellites, destroying them with one hit. They crushed communication towers with long-range beams. Every move they made felt like they were taking apart Haven 9 piece by piece, slowly and painfully. There were no reinforcements coming. None of the other human colonies were close enough to help even if they wanted to. Haven 9 was alone. The council members argued for hours about what to do. Some said they should surrender, even though everyone knew surrender meant nothing to the Vorath. Others said they should try one last attack, even if it failed. Some wanted to move all civilians into underground tunnels and hope the enemy would leave them alone. But deep down, no one believed that there was only one option left. And no one wanted to say it at the back of the room. One officer finally spoke in a quiet, heavy voice. "There is one call we haven't made." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he meant. There existed a species in the galaxy known by many names, but almost no one spoke them aloud. Humanity had crossed paths with them long ago, and the memory of that encounter still haunted old records. They were powerful, unpredictable, and feared even by the strongest civilizations. Some said their technology was alive. Others said they were born from the edge of a dying star. No one knew the truth. What everyone did know was simple. They were not to be trusted, and definitely not to be contacted. But they were also the only beings the Vorath had ever hesitated to fight. Their common name in human databases was the Strayburn. Humanity had promised never to reach out to them again after a disastrous event decades before. The story said a small human research team once miscommunicated with the Strayburn, leading to an incident that destroyed 3 whole facilities. No one fully understood what the Strayburn wanted back then. They didn't speak like other species. Their messages were strange, sometimes sounding almost like broken human voices, sometimes like echoes of memories. After the incident, every human leader agreed they must never contact them again. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable. And yet, now, in this dark hour, Haven 9 had nothing left. No soldiers strong enough. No weapons powerful enough. No allies close enough. And the Vorath would arrive on the surface within hours. The council argued again. The oldest member slammed her hands on the table and said, "We do not invite another danger into our sky. We already have one enemy. Must we call a second one?" Another officer replied, "If we don't call them, we will not survive long enough to regret the decision." Fear tightened the air. The room felt smaller, the lights dimmer. Every person in that bunker felt the same thing. They were choosing between 2 terrors. One enemy was already here. The other might come if called. But the second one, terrifying as they were, might also be the only ones who could challenge the Vorath. Finally, after hours of shouting, crying, and arguing, a tired voice spoke from the corner. It belonged to a technician who rarely said anything in meetings. His words were steady, even though his hands shook. "If we do nothing, all of us die. If we call them, maybe they won't come. Or maybe they will. And maybe they won't help. But at least there is a chance. Right now, a chance is more than we have." The room went quiet again. No one looked at each other. No one wanted their face tied to this decision. But slowly, one by one, heads began to nod hesitantly, fearfully, but sincerely. The council had made its choice. The call would be made. The beacon used to contact the Strayburn was not a normal device. It was old, older than most buildings on Haven 9. It had strange markings and humming circuits that no human could fully understand. It was kept locked in a deep vault, almost like an item of shame. Only a few people had ever seen it. Now they carried it into the command room with quiet hands. The device pulsed with a faint blue light, as if it knew it was being awakened after many years. Activating it required a special kind of signal, a mixture of communication code and human DNA recognition. It was unsettling, the way the device almost seemed to breathe when touched. The officers hesitated before placing their hand on the genetic scanner. When the beacon finally powered on, a low vibrating sound filled the room. The technicians felt their chests tighten. They were not just sending a message. They were calling out across the galaxy to a species known for being the most dangerous beings alive. Even if they saved Haven 9, would they leave afterward? Or would they bring new problems no one could predict? But the decision was made. The beacon released a wave of bright energy, invisible to the eye, but powerful enough to travel past the Vorath blockade, past the silent stars, past the empty systems, and into the deep unknown where the Strayborn were believed to live. Once the signal left the device, the beacon went dark. There was nothing left to do now. The officers shut it off and waited, staring at the long-range scanners. Hours passed. Outside, the Vorath began their final approach toward the colony. Their ships moved closer, their weapons glowing, From the ground, people looked up and saw the sky turning red from the reflection of enemy lights. Some ran to shelters. Some held their families close. Some just stood still, unable to move. Inside the bunker, hope turned thinner and thinner. Some officers wondered if the call had even reached the stray barn. Others wondered if maybe it was better if it hadn't. Then, suddenly, one of the scanners blinked. A small, sharp reading appeared. Something was happening far beyond the system. A ripple of energy, unlike anything the technicians had seen before, spread across the scanner's grid. It looked almost like space itself was being folded or peeled open. Another alert flashed. Then another dot. The officers leaned closer, breath held. A tear opened in the fabric of space, almost like a wound shimmering with strange colors no human language had names for. And through that tear, a fleet emerged. Dark ships, silent and smooth, shaped like long crescents. Their hulls shimmered with patterns that moved on their own, like reflections in deep water. They formed a perfect line, blocking the Vorath in one clean motion. The room fell silent. The Strayburn had answered the call, and Haven 9 could only hope that this was a blessing, not the beginning of something worse. For a long moment, no one inside the command bunker spoke. The screens showed the strange fleet that had arrived, lined up in perfect formation. Their ships did not look like anything humans had seen before. They were dark, smooth, almost liquid-looking, as if they were made from a material that could change shape if it wanted to. Tiny lines of light moved across their surfaces like slow pulses. It felt as if the ships were alive, watching, waiting. The Vorath ships, which had been moving toward Haven 9 to begin their final attack, suddenly stopped. Their formation broke slightly, like someone had grabbed their attention and twisted their focus away. The Vorath were known for never hesitating, never pausing. And yet, here they were frozen in space. This alone was terrifying. Whatever could make the hearing Vorath hesitate was powerful, beyond anything Haven 9 had ever imagined. Inside the bunker, the officers stared at the stray-born fleet with a mix of hope and fear. Hope, because maybe this meant the Vorath would turn back. Fear, because they had no idea what the Strayborn wanted. They had called them for help, but the Strayborn were not known for kindness. They acted based on rules only they understood, and sometimes those rules made no sense to humans. A young technician whispered, "What if they don't remember the old agreement? What if they come here thinking we're the enemy too?" Another answered softly, "Maybe they don't care about the past. Maybe they only came because of the signal." The truth was, no one knew. Humanity had encountered the Strayborn only once before. It happened long before most people on Haven 9 were even born. The old reports described a meeting with a small Strayborn scout group. They had appeared suddenly and without warning, just like today. They didn't speak in a clear language. Their voices sounded like fragmented echoes, or like several tones speaking at the same time. At first, the meeting did not seem dangerous. The Strayborn examined human technology, walked around the research stations with silent curiosity, and left without harming anyone. But then something changed. No one understood what caused it. Maybe someone touched the wrong object. Maybe the Strayborn misread a gesture. Maybe an automatic alarm startled them. Whatever it was, the result had been disastrous. 3 facilities were destroyed in only minutes. Not intentionally targeted, more like swept away by a sudden burst of energy. After that day, humans decided the Strayborn were too risky, too unpredictable. Nobody knew their rules, so nobody could avoid breaking them. That memory still lived in the Council's mind even now, decades later. And yet, desperation had forced them to call these same beings for help. The bunker lights flickered as the scanner picked up a new signal. Something was broadcasting from the Strayborn fleet. A single ship at the center began glowing slightly brighter. Then a strange tone filled the command room soft at first, almost like a hum from under the floor. The tone grew clearer, rising and falling in strange waves. It was not the kind of sound made for human ears. It vibrated through the air, through the walls, through each person's chest like a slow heartbeat. Is that a message? Someone whispered. The technicians worked quickly, trying to translate the signal. The sound formed patterns. Not words, patterns. It felt as if the Strayborn were sending emotions instead of sentences. Calmness, attention, recognition. Recognition. That. One hit everyone the hardest. It meant the Strayborn remembered humanity. A second later, the hum stopped. The screens shifted to a new communication window. A soft static appeared first, then a voice distorted, echoing, almost like 2 or 3 voices speaking together through water. Humanity. You called. We answer. The room fell silent again. No one had expected a clear message. No one had expected the Strayborn to speak their language. The voice continued, Vorith. Hostile to your kind. Hostile to ours. Conflict is old. Reason, endless. The officers exchanged confused glances. What did that mean? Why were the Vorith hostile to the Strayborn? And why say their conflict was endless? Before the officers could respond, the Strayborn voice added, You are targeted. We intervene once. Once. That word carried a heavy warning. The Vorith must have understood this message as well, because their ships suddenly repositioned. The large Voroth warship at the center fired a warning beam into empty space, not hitting anything, but clearly meant to show they wouldn't step down easily. It was like 2 storms had locked. Eyes in the sky. Back on Haven 9. Civilians hiding inside shelters felt the ground shake from distant shockwaves. People tried to comfort their children, telling them it was just thunder, even though they knew it wasn't. Some prayed quietly. Others held on to small items from home bracelets, photos, small toys, hoping the world they loved would still be there tomorrow. Inside the bunker, the council needed answers. One officer stepped closer to the communication console and spoke carefully, trying not to sound afraid. This is Haven 9. We request assistance in defending our colony from the Vorith. There was a long pause. The Strayborn voice returned. Assistance already decided. Your signal. Bound us? Bound us? Another officer whispered. What does that mean? No one knew. But the Strayborn didn't explain. They never explained anything they did. Outside the bunker, the battle began before anyone was ready. It started with a silent flash. A Strayborn ship fired a beam of energy that didn't look like normal light or plasma. It shimmered, twisted, and curved around itself like a ribbon. It struck a Vorith cruiser, bending its hull inward without breaking it, almost like crushing a metal can. The Vorith ship exploded in a slow, swirling ball of fragments. The screens inside the bunker lit up with alerts. Everyone leaned closer, watching every movement with wide eyes. The Vorith responded with heavy fire. Their weapons shot straight lines of red energy that cut across space like burning threads. But the Strayborn ships moved in ways no human ship could. They didn't turn, they folded. Their shapes twisted slightly, like they bent reality around themselves. The beams passed through empty space where the ships had been only a heartbeat ago. Then the Strayborn fired again. And again. Each beam they sent was different. One shot spiraled. Another split into 3. Another curved around stray meteors. It was like they were adjusting their weapons in real time. Learning each moment, the officers realized something then. The Strayborn weren't just advanced. They were evolving during the battle. The Vorith fought fiercely, sending in more ships, firing more beams, trying to push through the Strayborn line. But every time they made progress, the Strayborn responded with a new pattern, a new attack, A new motion dot. It was not a battle. It was like watching an ancient rivalry unfold, and humans were simply witnesses. Inside the bunker, fear began mixing with awe. One officer whispered, "This is why no one survives meeting them. They don't just fight, they transform the battlefield." Another replied, "Then what will they do once this is over? To us?" That question hung in the air, like cold smoke. No. One knew the answer, but one thing was becoming clear. Whatever the Strayborn were, whatever they believed, whatever rules they followed, they had answered the call. And the moment the call reached them, something ancient between humanity and the Strayborn had awakened again. Not friendship. Not alliance. Something. Stranger. Something the officers could feel, but not name. As the battle above the colony raged on, the people of Haven 9 could only watch the sky flicker with colors they had never seen before, hoping the galaxy's most dangerous species truly came as rescuers, and not as the next danger waiting to unfold. The battle outside continued to rage, but inside the bunker, the officers were focused on something else. They knew the Strayborn had come, and they had seen the Vorath hesitate, but that did not mean Haven 9 was safe. The Strayborn were unpredictable. They could fight the Vorath and still turn their attention to humans afterward. The tension in the room was thick, like the whole bunker was holding its breath. The communication screen flickered again, showing strange shapes and symbols that no one could read. The translation system tried to decode them, but failed. The symbols moved too quickly, shifting like smoke. The officers could not tell if the Strayborn were sending messages or simply letting their technology leak signals into the air. "We need to decide what to do next," one officer finally said, breaking the heavy silence. But no one knew the answer. Outside, the Strayborn fleet moved with perfect coordination. They acted as one mind, one giant presence. Whenever the Vorath attempted to attack from a new angle, the Strayborn ships formed a barrier, catching the attack before it reached the colony. It looked effortless, as if they knew the Vorath's moves before they even happened. Inside the bunker, the officers watched the battle in real time. The screen showed flashes of light, explosions, ripples in space, and distortions that didn't look natural. The Strayborn weapons did not behave like normal weapons. Each blast bent light around it in a strange way, leaving trails that shimmered long after the shot had disappeared. A quiet voice spoke from the back of the room. "Why are they helping us?" Everyone turned toward the young assistant who had asked the question. He wasn't challenging anything. He simply voiced what everyone was secretly thinking. One of the older council members exhaled slowly. "They said the Vorath are also their enemy. Maybe this is all they want. Maybe this is only about the Vorath." Another added, "Or maybe they are just following some rule we don't understand." Their message said something about being bound to the call. The council fell into a long discussion about what that could mean. So many theories were thrown around. Maybe the Strayborn responded to distress signals from every species. Maybe they only answered signals with certain genetic markers. Maybe they considered calls for help a challenge of honor. No one knew. But one thing was clear. This was not mercy. The Strayborn didn't help out of kindness. They did not seem like a species that cared about emotions or sympathy. Their help followed something older, something deeper. A principle they had lived by long before humans even discovered space travel. The technicians received another signal. A blinking red light appeared on the main screen. It showed a new transmission coming from one of the Vorath ships. This was rare. The Vorath almost never sent messages. They believed communication with others only slowed them down. The council leaned closer as the translation system attempted to decode the message. It came out broken at first, then slowly began forming clear voice patterns. The Vorath message was short. Interference detected. Unacceptable. Remove yourselves. The room froze. Who were they talking to? The Strayburn? The humans? Both? The Strayburn answered immediately. Their reply came as a single line of text on the screen, cold and simple. Declined. Such a small word. Yet it carried the weight of two ancient enemies finally meeting again. The Vorath fired a massive beam toward the Strayborn flagship. The ground on Haven 9 vibrated from the sheer power of it. A white flash filled the command screens. For a moment, the officers thought the Strayburn ship had been destroyed. But then the bright flash faded, revealing the ship still there, untouched. The enemy beam had bent around the Strayborn vessel like water against stone. This was the moment the Vorath realized that fighting the Strayborn directly would not be simple. Inside the bunker, panic mixed with awe. No one fully understood the scale of what they were watching. The Vorath had destroyed entire planets before. They were feared throughout the galaxy. But here, facing the Strayborn, they looked small, still dangerous, still deadly. But small. The officers began to talk again, this time more urgently. We need to open a communication channel to the Strayborn flagship. One said, what if that makes things worse? Another replied, we already called them here. The first officer answered, the least we can do is try to make communication clear. After a short debate, they sent a request for direct communication. The room waited and waited. The Strayburn did not answer immediately. Instead, the only response was a soft hum echoing through the speakers again, like the sound of metal breathing. Just then, a civilian burst into the room. He had run all the way from the upper levels, and his face was pale. The shelters are filling up, he said breathlessly. People are asking if the Strayburn are going to land. They want to know if they should be ready to evacuate again. No one in the bunker had an answer for him. They watched the screens, unable to look away from the chaos unfolding above. The Strayborn flagship suddenly released a new wave of energy. The blast was huge, bright, and almost silent. It spread outward like a wide ring, passing through Vorath ships like they were made of fog. Yet when the wave faded, the Vorath ships did not explode. Instead, they stopped moving completely motionless, powered down, floating in space. Everyone gasped. What did they do? Someone whispered. The technicians studied the readings. It looks like the Strayburn shut down their systems without destroying them. It's some kind of control field. The Vorath ships weren't dead. They were trapped. It was more terrifying than an explosion, because it meant the Strayborn could take apart an entire fleet without even breaking it. The Vorath, frustrated and cornered, tried something desperate. They summoned additional reinforcements. More enemy ships warped into the system, larger and more heavily armed. These ones didn't hesitate like the first group. They charged in aggressively, firing huge beams aimed not only at the Strayborn, but at Haven 9 itself. The officers panicked. They are targeting the colony. Before anyone could react, the Strayborn fleet moved in front of Haven 9 with inhuman speed. Their ships shifted position with perfect synchronization, forming a protective wall. Their hulls glowed with patterns that flickered rapidly, absorbing the incoming energy. It looked like the Strayborn ships were drinking the attacks, pulling them inside themselves with no visible damage. The air inside the bunker felt heavy as everyone realized how truly advanced these beings were. Anew, Vorath reinforcements poured more power into their weapons. But the Strayburn answered with a new kind of attack-thin beams that curved through space like threads. They wrapped around the Vorath ships, squeezing them tightly before releasing bursts of controlled energy. Several Vorath vessels cracked in half. The battle grew more intense. But slowly, the Strayborn took control of the skies. Piece by piece, they broke the Vorath formations. Ship after ship dimmed, lost power, or exploded quietly into fragments. The officers watched silently, overwhelmed. They had expected a fight. They had expected destruction. But they had not expected this. The Strayborn were not just warriors. They were executioners of balance, enforcing a cosmic rule no one else understood. After nearly an hour, the last Voroth reinforcement fled the system, jumping into hyperspace without looking back. The battlefield became still. The Strayborn fleet hovered above. Haven 9 in total silence. No one knew what would happen next. Inside the bunker, fear returned. The officers whispered quietly. "Now it's just us and them. What do they want? Will they leave? Or will they come down?" The communication screen blinked again. This time the message was clear, calm, and unbelievably direct. Prepare for contact. Everyone froze. Contact. That meant the Strayborn were coming to the surface. Some people in the bunker felt their stomach twist. Others felt a strange calm, like the shock had worn off and only acceptance remained. One thing was now certain. The Strayborn had intervened in the battle. But whatever came next was not going to be simple. The call had been answered. And now Haven 9 would learn the price. The station felt heavier than ever that morning. Not because the gravity settings had changed, but because everyone seemed to carry an invisible weight on their shoulders. The alarms had gone quiet for a few hours, which should have brought some relief, but instead it only made the silence feel unnatural. It felt like the calm before something big, something none of them wanted to think about. The crew moved around slowly, as if afraid one wrong step might bring more trouble. Even the lights in the hall seemed dimmer, although no one had touched the controls. The team had spent the last few days trying to understand the ancient signal they had discovered, the one that seemed to pull them toward the strange planet sitting far from any known star routes. The planet looked quiet from space, almost peaceful, but everyone knew better. Too many unknown things had happened since they received the strange beacon. Too many warnings had been ignored simply because they had no other choice. The commander leaned over the large display table, studying the planet's surface. It was covered with thick clouds, and only small parts of the land showed through. Most of it looked gray, like stone or ash. No signs of life. No cities, no lights. No sound except the repeating signal that played every 30 minutes, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Beside him, the chief technician scrolled through data that made no sense. Numbers that didn't match any known language. Readings that changed every time they tried to lock onto them. And energy patterns that behaved like nothing built by natural forces. It was like the planet itself kept shifting, hiding parts of itself from view. "Maybe the reading tools aren't meant for whatever this is," the technician muttered. "Maybe it's something beyond what we've studied." The commander didn't respond. He had heard the same worry from every department. They were dealing with something older, something that didn't want to be measured. Across the room, the youngest officer paced slowly, holding a tablet, but not reading it. He was thinking about the message that the unknown species had sent earlier, a message that changed everything. The species had claimed to know what was on the planet. They warned the crew to stay away. They warned that the thing inside the planet was older than all of them combined, but the galaxy wasn't simple. A warning didn't help when they had nowhere else to go. Their supplies were running low, and staying in orbit too long would drain their power. The fleet they belonged to was too far to call for help. They had already made that final call everyone talked about, the one they had hoped they would never have to make. They called the most dangerous species in the known galaxy, the one no one ever asked for help unless they had no other choice. The Elders. The Elders lived far away, but their reach always seemed close. They were old, not just in years, but in knowledge. Most people across the galaxy believed the Elders could see things before they happened. Some said they could read entire histories just by touching a piece of stone. Some claimed they could hear thoughts carried through space. The crew didn't know what was true and what was myth. But one thing was certain: every species feared them. And fear was not something easily built. The message the elders sent was simple: do not step on that soil. But that wasn't an option anymore. The station's support systems were nearing their limits. The power core had been running on reduced capacity for days. The food processors had begun to fail. Life support was stable, but only for a little while longer. They needed anything on that planet that could help them survive. And they needed it soon. The crew gathered in the central hall for a meeting. No one looked excited. No one tried to pretend everything was fine. This was one of those moments where every small sound seemed louder, like the soft hum of the lights or the quiet tapping of fingers. Against metal seats, the commander stood in the center and took a deep breath before speaking. We don't have the luxury of waiting anymore. The power levels have dropped again. If we don't act, we won't last the week. A quiet murmur passed through the room, but no one argued. We've been studying the planet. We think there might be structures hidden under the surface. If those structures belong to an ancient culture, they might have energy sources or tools we can use. Someone raised a hand. And if those structures are dangerous? If the warning from the elders was right? The commander paused. He didn't like giving imperfect answers, but this time there was no perfect answer. We move carefully. We send a small team first. If there's any sign of danger, we pull back immediately. The hall stayed quiet. No one moved. Then the youngest officer stepped forward. I'll go. Others followed, volunteering without being asked. Not because they wanted glory, but because the station had become a second home, and no one wanted to abandon it to the cold silence of space. The commander nodded slowly. Prepare your suits. We launch in 2 hours. While the crew prepared for the landing, a strange pressure filled the air, as if something unseen was watching them. The signal from the planet grew louder in their communication systems, not in volume, but in clarity. It no longer sounded random. It sounded like words, or at least shapes of meaning. The technician tried to decode it again, but failed. It's changing on its own, like it's reacting to us. That was the last thing they needed, something unknown reacting to their presence. 2 hours later, the landing craft drifted away from the station. The planet grew larger in the window, its gray surface looking colder and emptier the closer they got. Clouds swirled in slow circles, but not like weather patterns. More like they were following a rhythm, a silent motion guided by a mind. The youngest officer gripped the seat and tried to calm his breathing. He wasn't scared of planets. He wasn't even scared of ancient ruins. But he was scared of unknown things that acted alive without actually being alive. The craft touched down on flat ground. Dust rose in soft waves, moving too smoothly for simple sand. The landing team stepped out carefully, their boots leaving small prints that faded almost instantly as the dust settled back into place. It's like the ground is breathing, one of them whispered. They walked toward a ridge where the scanners had picked up something underground, sharp lines too straight to be natural. The ground trembled lightly under their steps, not enough to cause fear, but enough to make them slow down. Then the youngest officer saw it, a shape sticking out from the ground. Not a rock, not metal, something carved. He brushed away the dust gently and uncovered a symbol, circular, with long lines spreading outward like rays. I've seen this before, the technician said through the helmet speaker. It matches the patterns from the signal. That meant the signal wasn't just a call. It was a lock, a key, a warning. They cleared more dust, and what they found made them freeze. A doorway, not built like a normal entrance, but shaped like it was waiting for someone to open it, waiting for a specific person. Before they could decide what to do, their combs crackled loudly. The elder voice returned. You were not meant to find that door. The entire team went still. Return to your ship, the voice continued. You are standing on the skin of something that should never wake. The ground trembled again. Stronger this time, not like an earthquake, more like a heartbeat. The commander's voice came through from the station. Team, report. The youngest officer swallowed hard. Sir, the planet is alive. And as the doorway slowly began to glow beneath their hands, they knew the warning had come too late. The glow from the doorway grew brighter with each passing second, spreading a soft light across the gray ground. It wasn't harsh or frightening, but it felt unusual, as if it was not just lighting the surface, but also reaching inside their minds. The landing team stepped back slowly, unsure if the glow meant danger or something else. None of them spoke for a moment, because they all thought the same thing. Whatever was inside the planet was aware of them. The youngest officer stared at the glowing lines. They curved smoothly, forming shapes he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar, like memories he never lived but could almost recall. He tried to shake the feeling away, but the soft vibration beneath the ground made it impossible to ignore. It was steady and rhythmic, almost like breathing. The voice of the elders echoed again through their combs, calm but firm. You must leave now. The doorway reacts only when a living mind stands near it. If it opens fully, we cannot guarantee your safety. The team exchanged nervous looks. The technician whispered, Why would they warn us now? Why didn't they tell us earlier what this planet holds? No one had an answer. The commander's voice came from the station above, steady but tense. Team, step back from the structure. We're detecting a surge of energy around your position. The youngest officer took a slow breath and stepped back. But the ground beneath him responded before he even moved. The glow faded slightly, as if the planet itself was aware of his indecision. He could feel a soft pulse under his boots, and every pulse made the doorway grow brighter. He whispered through the coms, It's reacting to us. Maybe to our presence. Maybe to something in us. The technician crouched down and touched the ground lightly. The dust moved away from his glove, almost like it refused to be touched. This isn't normal soil. It's responding like it has its own signals. The ground pulsed again. The doorway shifted. Not by much, but enough for everyone to feel the air change around them. The air inside their suits smelled the same, but something felt different, slightly colder, slightly heavier, slightly more aware. The commander on the station spoke again. Return to the craft. That's an order. The youngest officer nodded, but his feet didn't move. It wasn't fear holding him in place. It was curiosity mixed with something deeper, something he didn't understand yet. He could sense that the planet was trying to communicate not with words, but with movement, light, and rhythm. The technician placed a hand on the officer's shoulder. Come on, we can't stay here. The team slowly backed away, step by careful step, but the planet reacted every time one of them moved. The ground pulsed stronger, the doorway glowed brighter, and the strange symbols along the entrance seemed to rearrange themselves, like they were trying to form a language. When they reached the landing craft, the vibrations softened again. The doorway dimmed. The air grew still. The youngest officer looked back at the ridge. The planet looked calm again, but now the calm felt like a pause, not a natural state. Back in the craft, they lifted off smoothly. No one spoke during the climb. They all stared through the window as the surface drifted away beneath them. The clouds moved like slow spirals, but now the spirals made sense. They weren't weather patterns. They were patterns of movement, like something beneath the planet was shaping them. When the landing craft reached the station, the crew gathered around them. Everyone wanted to know what they saw, but the landing team couldn't put most of it into words. It wasn't something that could be explained easily. It had to be felt. The commander listened closely, his face tightening as the technician described how the ground reacted to their presence. And the symbols? The commander asked. They moved on their own, the technician answered. Not like writing changing on a screen. More like the planet itself was shifting them. The commander leaned back in his chair. He didn't speak for a long moment. He knew they needed answers, and he knew waiting would only make things worse. We need to talk to the elders again, he finally said. This isn't just an old structure. Something is alive down there. The communication team tried to contact the elders, but the response took minutes longer than before. When the reply finally came, the voice sounded heavier, as if carrying a weight of knowledge they never wished to share. You touched the threshold. The commander responded. We didn't open anything. We stepped back when the doorway reacted. But it reacted because you stood there, the elder voice replied. That alone is enough. The threshold has memory. Now it remembers you. A cold silence fell in the room. The youngest officer asked quietly, What does that mean? What exactly is remembering us? The elder's reply was slow and deliberate. The planet was once home to a species older than any of us. They created guardians beings that could sleep for ages and awaken only when needed. These guardians were never meant to interact with younger minds. Your presence disturbed their resting place. But we didn't see anything alive, the technician said. You weren't supposed to, the elder answered. They rest beneath the surface. They do not awaken easily. But they sense intention. They sense thought. When you stepped on the ground, you gave them a signal that something has changed. The commander's voice grew firm. We were told nothing about guardians. If this planet is dangerous, why wasn't it marked? The elder paused again before answering. Because this knowledge is not meant to be widespread. We guard it because younger species are curious, and curiosity leads them to places they are not prepared for. The guardians protect something hidden deep inside the planet, something that must never be uncovered. The room felt heavier than ever. Everyone looked at the youngest officer, as if he somehow held a piece of the mystery without knowing it. The commander asked the question everyone feared. Is our presence here putting us in danger? Yes, the elder answered. But not in the way you think. The guardians do not attack. They do not chase. They do not destroy. They observe. And once they have observed enough, they respond. How? The technician asked. With change, the elder said simply. The world around you will shift. Your technology will behave strangely. Your systems will react in ways you cannot explain. It is their way of communicating that you must leave. The commander took a slow breath. We cannot leave yet. We don't have the power or supplies. We came here because we had no other choice. The elder's voice softened slightly. Then you must be gentle with this world. Do not disturb it further. Do not touch the threshold again. You may survive if you remain at a distance. The communication ended without another word. The crew looked at each other, unsure what to do next. They needed resources, but the planet was now marked as forbidden. The doorway was waiting, the ground was listening, and the guardians were aware. Hours passed as the crew tried to think of solutions. They checked their power core again. It was dropping faster. The food processors worked, but only barely. The station felt colder, not because of the temperature, but because everyone's nerves were tightening. Late in the night cycle, the youngest officer stood near the window, looking down at the planet. Clouds moved in slow circles. Soft lights flickered under the surface, not bright enough to be cities, but bright enough to show change. He whispered to himself, What exactly woke up? Behind him, the commander walked in quietly. Can't sleep? The officer shook his head. It feels like the planet is watching us. The commander nodded. Maybe it is, but we have to stay calm. We have a plan forming. The officer turned. What plan? We're going to search the upper atmosphere, the commander explained. Not the surface. There may be resources there, minerals, frozen gases, something we can collect safely. If we stay away from the ground, the Guardians might stay asleep. The officer looked back at the planet. What if they don't stay asleep? The commander placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we hope they understand we're not here to harm them. The planet pulsed again, a faint glow spreading through the clouds. As if responding to their words, the officer whispered, "I don't think this place understands harm or safety. I think it understands thought." And deep beneath the surface, something shifted. Something old. Something aware. The next day began with a strange quiet. Not the normal silence of space, but something heavier. Something that felt like it came from the planet below. The crew woke up feeling it before they even fully opened their eyes. A soft pressure, like a presence standing beside each of them, watching without speaking. No alarms were ringing. No systems had failed. Yet everyone felt a sense of expectation in the air. The commander gathered the main team in the control hall. The screens around them glowed softly, showing the planet's surface. The clouds had shifted again overnight, forming wide spirals that seemed almost too perfect to be natural. They looked like symbols drawn across the entire sky of the planet. The youngest officer stared at the image, sensing something familiar in the shapes, something from the doorway they had seen the previous day. He tried to ignore the feeling, but it wouldn't leave. The technician leaned over the display and zoomed in on one of the spirals. "It matches the symbols on the threshold," he said slowly. "Not perfectly, but close enough that it can't be coincidence." The commander placed a hand on the table. "If the shapes are spreading to the atmosphere, then something under the surface is active. But what does it want?" Someone whispered. No one answered. The station's lights flickered gently for a moment, as if reacting to the tension. The commander cleared his throat. "We can't leave, but we also can't disturb the planet again. Our only safe option is the upper atmosphere. If we collect materials there, we might extend our supplies long enough to wait for our fleet." Everyone nodded. It was not a great plan, but it was the only plan they had. Within a few hours, a small atmospheric craft was prepared. It was lighter than the landing vessel and equipped with tools meant for collecting gases and dust from the high sky. The youngest officer volunteered to pilot it, and the commander agreed. Knowing the officer understood the planet better than anyone else right now, not through science, but through instinct, the craft launched quietly, drifting away from the station like a leaf floating off a tree branch. It descended slowly toward the upper layers of the planet's atmosphere. The cloud spirals glowed faintly, as if lit from within by a soft energy dot inside the craft. The officer watched the numbers on his screen. Everything seemed normal so far: stable air pressure, steady winds, no unusual readings. He breathed out slowly, trying to calm the sense of presence he still felt. As the craft dipped lower, tiny sparks of light danced across the windows. They looked like dust, but brighter small glowing particles drifting like fireflies in slow motion. He activated the collectors, which began pulling the particles into containers. The readings showed high energy levels, enough to power parts of the station for days. This might work, he said to himself. Back on the station, the crew monitored the signals. The energy readings increased steadily. Hope, which had been quiet for days, began to return in small waves. But then the atmosphere changed. The glowing particles outside the craft began to gather, drifting closer instead of staying scattered. They formed small lines, then longer lines, then shaped smooth curves that looked like the same symbols from the ground. The officer stared at them, his breath catching. The shapes weren't random. They were trying to form something, trying to communicate. "Commander," he said through the comms, "something's happening." The commander's voice came back quickly. "What do you see?" "It's the symbols again. They're forming around the craft." "I don't think it's a threat." It feels like the planet is trying to speak. The commander didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "Keep calm. Tell us everything you see." The officer watched as the glowing particles arranged themselves more clearly. They formed a large circle, then divided into smaller shapes that flowed into one another like moving art. He didn't understand the language, but he understood the feeling behind it. "It's not warning us this time," he said quietly. "It feels like it's asking something." The technician's voice came through the coms. "Asking what?" The officer shook his head. "I don't know. But it's not angry. It's curious." The energy collectors continued to gather particles, but the symbols did not react badly. They simply stayed close, forming a gentle halo around the craft. Then the officer felt something new, a quiet presence in his mind. Not a voice, not words, just a feeling. Like standing near someone who wanted to understand him. He spoke softly, even though no one was beside him. "We're not here to harm you. We just need help to survive. That's all." As soon as he said the words, the glowing particles pulsed once, as if responding to his honesty. The symbols shifted again, forming a pattern that looked almost like an open hand. The station crew watched in silence. None of them could believe what they were seeing. A technician whispered, "It's responding to him." The commander leaned forward. "Stay calm. Speak slowly. Tell it what we need." The officer nodded. His hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from the weight of knowing he was communicating with something ancient, something thoughtful. "We're running low on energy and supplies," he said softly. "We need time. We need help to stay alive until our people arrive." The glowing symbols drifted closer. They formed a spiral, then expanded outward. The whole sky seemed to pulse with soft light. Then the craft's controls flickered, but not in a dangerous way. The screens lit up with energy readings far higher than before. The collectors filled rapidly, faster than any machine should allow. It was as if the planet itself was giving them what they needed. The commander's voice broke the silence. "Officer, are you seeing this?" "Yes," he breathed. "It's helping us." The craft filled with luminous particles until the containers reached full capacity. The symbols slowly began to drift back, dispersing into the atmosphere like a gentle wave receding into the sea. The officer felt the quiet presence fade. Not completely, but softly, like a friendly hand releasing its hold. He whispered, "Thank you." The symbols pulsed one final time, then disappeared entirely. The craft returned to the station without trouble. When it docked, the crew rushed to greet the officer. Everyone's faces showed the same mixture of relief, wonder, and disbelief. The energy gathered from the atmosphere powered the station fully. The lights brightened. The system stabilized. Even the food processors began functioning more smoothly. It felt like the station itself took a deep breath of fresh air. Later that night, the commander stood with the officer near the large window overlooking the planet. The spirals in the clouds were fading slowly, but still visible, like soft marks left on the sky. "You did well," the commander said quietly. "I think it listened," the officer replied. "It didn't just listen," the commander said. "It understood." The officer nodded slowly. "The elders were right. The guardians don't harm. They observe. And maybe they help when they choose to." The commander looked at him. "Why do you think it chose you?" The officer thought for a moment.